I'm going to hand over to Shamanth.
Thank you, James. Always a big fan of your live shows, and now, of course, your work from home editions. You guys always have great speakers, great content. Excited to participate again. Yeah, so today's session is going to be around how to implement SKAdNetwork, really because a lot of mobile marketing we're doing is going to hit a reset. That's what yeah, so let's jump right in. Uh, Before I do that, there will be Q&As at the end, so feel free to share any Q&As, feel free to ask Q&As at the end. Uh, yeah, let's jump right in. Uh, yeah, this is a quote that I like to start off with because may you live in interesting times with possibly an apocryphal Chinese curse, make what you will of it. So we certainly live in interesting times just now. This is a bit about me. I head up the boutique UA firm Rocketship HQ, done mobile UA since 2013, as you may or may not see from my gray hair. As James said, I run the podcast Mobile User Acquisition Show. Also, feel free to check out our book, The Definitive Guide to Marketing in a Post-IDFA World. That's Google for it, look for it on our Mobile UA Show website, and we can, that has certainly a lot of insights from the best episodes we've had on the IDFA transition. This is what we're going to cover today. How SKAdNetwork works, how is conversion tracking different, how is it structured, how does the campaign structure change, how do you run creative tests, and how do you optimize for consent. I think we missed putting the emojis there, so just don't tell anybody. And of course, how do you measure and report on performance, right? Let's jump right in. And the first part is going to cover some of the basics. So if you're fairly familiar with that, feel free to skip over that, but I want to cover some of the basics in the spirit of ensuring completeness, and then we will get into some of the other details. So what's a SKAdNetwork, right? So here's the fundamental difference. With an MMP, you know and understand exactly how valuable the user is, exactly how valuable the install is, because you know the exact revenue from them. And with SKAdNetwork, you do not know individual user level value. You get only cohorted level value, and that too, you do not get precise revenue numbers. You just get an imputed approximate conversion value, which hopefully corresponds to the value of a user, but may not necessarily have a direct correlation. So here's how that will be looking. That looks visually, right? Until MMP, until iOS 14, you know exactly channel, campaign, ad set, ad user level, exactly what sort of events have they performed. And SKAdNetwork, all you have is one single conversion value. That's about it. And why is conversion value not very precise? Here's why. Because SKAdNetwork has what they call a timer. Basically, the moment a user installs, the timer starts and an install postback is sent. The first time a conversion value is updated, the timer gets reset. Let's assume you have a $1 purchase, you update the conversion value with that. Timer gets reset, and the timer starts ticking for another 24-hour time period. Let's just say this is the second purchase. And then 24 hours elapse with no change in conversion value. This is when the timer expires. And the moment the timer expires, the conversion value is sent to the ad network. Actually, it's not sent at the moment of expiry. Any point of time, 24 hours afterward, after the expiry of the timer, the postback is sent. So there is no timestamp with the postback. So all you know is that there was a conversion. You don't know when it happened, right? All of this makes understanding user value extremely tricky, especially in comparison with how we're doing it these days, how we're doing it today. So with that in mind, it becomes very, very critical to define a conversion value as an indicator of an LTV. You could say, look, my user value for a user who goes through this funnel, right, registers, goes to level 1, goes to level 50, then makes a purchase, is more valuable than a user who installs, registers, and just doesn't do anything afterward. So you could say this user's value is 20, this user's value is 1. That's one way of defining user values. You only have a 6-bit value, so you can have 64 values from 00000 to 111111, and you basically get to define what your user values could be, which is where the challenge is with SKAdNetwork. And we'll talk about some of the considerations, some of the ways you could be defining these values in the next couple of slides. Right, so key ways in which you can architect conversion values. Number one, you can architect conversion values based on time. So you want to have, you could say, look, a user came back today, tomorrow, day after, so 3 times. So we're going to assign a value of 3 to them. That's one way to do it. Monetization, depending on revenue events in your app. User made purchase of $5, $10, $15. Those could definitely reflect conversion value. Retention and engagement, again, number of sessions within the app that could be reflected, or the retention, or which could be, which can have some parallels with time itself. So you could certainly use retention as a way to do it. And of course, you can have referral or virality-based events, which is for user invited a friend, that could augment the conversion value accordingly. Something to note is conversion values do not have to be linked to events actually performed by users, which means user logged in, user installed today, did nothing, and just didn't come back for 2 days. You can still increase your conversion value number. You don't have to wait for the user to actually perform an event. You can still do that, increase it, right? So which means if you say, look, most of my users make a purchase on day 2 or day 3, you can say, okay, day 0, I'll send a conversion event for install and first open. I will wait for 1 day, and day 3, I will send the revenue event if they make a purchase. That is totally acceptable. That's totally something you can do. So how do you come up with what events to pick? How do you come up with what sort of conversion values, what sort of triggers you have for conversion values? Look at your user progressions on multiple dimensions, right? So you look at different levels users are at. You look at the retention numbers for users. You look at the revenue for users on different days after install. You can do that with just a spreadsheet. You don't necessarily need super fancy data structures to be able to do that. So in this case, we see, 47% of users complete level 20. And this roughly corresponds to D1, right? And D7, and 25% of users complete level 30. This corresponds to D7. 16% complete level 40. This corresponds to D14. So sorry, this is the retention number, retention chart, right? So you say, look, if a user gets to level 20, I know this user has spent about 1 day on this. On average, the users got into level 30, users spent about 7 days. So that is certainly a consideration you can use to evaluate what your conversion value structures could be. And you can and should absolutely do this for, if you have different IAP streams, you can and should absolutely do this for different IAP streams just as well. So I'm going to show examples of conversion architecture, how you might implement this for 3 different kinds of apps. High ARPU strategy game, low retention, hyper casual, and of course the subscription app, just to illustrate what your conversion architecture could look like. right? So with a high value, high ARPU strategy game that has front-loaded IAPs, you use early revenue as a proxy for LTV. In fact, for a lot of apps, you will want to have early events as some sort of proxy for LTV. In this case, we recommend taking the first 2 bits, map it to duration elapsed, because you want to say give it for at least 3 days. 0, 1 at 0, 1, 1 day elapses, 0, 2, 2 days, 1, 1, 3 days. So you look at the first 3 days worth of purchases. The next 2 bits map to IAP purchases. The next 2 bits map to levels completed, right? That's one way of doing it. Obviously, the goal here isn't to say this is the exact single way to do it, because your mileage may vary. You want to see how the events are architected within your app before you map these out for yourself. The second example we have is low retention hyper casual games. Again, this is very directly retention driven. So we typically recommend the first 3 bits to map to first 7 days of use. So the more often the user uses the app, the higher the value. The next 3 bits map to levels of videos watched, 10, 50, or 100 videos watched. You could certainly reverse this just as well. You could say first 3 bits map to the number of videos watched and the next 3 to the number of days. You're going to have to test and see what makes the most sense for you in mapping user values to conversion values within a SKAdNetwork. Third one is, again, a subscription app. The first 2 bits reference the number of days. The next 2 bits map to points in the subscription funnel, register, free trial, or subscription. And the last 2, of course, are the content consumed, 5 to 10 puzzles, or 5 to 10 meditations, 5 to 10 workouts, whatever that means for you, right? Again, this is meant to inform the fact that, look, for a subscription app, a lot of the conversions happen very early on in the first 1 or 2 days. So you want to capture the first couple of days right here. All right. So those are a couple of examples of how you might architect conversion values for your app. Let's look at other considerations and other parts of your SKAdNetwork strategy. One is targeting. So there are going to be no lookalikes. And the primary ways to approach targeting in an SKAdNetwork paradigm is going to be interest-based targeting. In fact, it would be good to, there's perhaps also a good time to start testing channels like Snap or TikTok, because they are very interest-driven. So this is definitely something that could be worth testing. And if you're using Google UAC with some amount of sophistication, you will have used creators to inform targeting, which means, look, if you want to target older users, you show older users in the app, so on and so forth. That's creator-based targeting is going to become more and more critical as we go ahead. So it's something that we do recommend starting to think about already. And in terms of campaign structure, right now you have channel, campaign, ad set, and ad. It's not 100% evident as to what's going to be realistically possible. We do know that there's going to be a maximum of 100 campaigns available, and the source level data is going to be available based on a privacy threshold, which is still somewhat unclear, which is still somewhat unknown. So be prepared to have much less granularity in terms of your campaign structure as compared to pre-iOS 14. Just know that there will be campaign level data, there will be ad set level data just as well. Yeah, again, you might want to segment out different geos or LTV tiers or creative concepts in your campaign level structure, right? So to make sure you are able to segment your campaigns your overall account based on the level of granularity that makes the most sense for you. So if you want to understand, look, are my US users more valuable than my Japanese users? That's a dimension on which you can change your campaign structure just as well, right? Yeah, this is still TBD, and you should look for updates, further updates from Apple, from the platforms to make sure you understand exactly how this is going to play out. In terms of measurement, as I said, the conversion value is reported by SKAdNetwork to the ad network, which in turn will report the conversion value to you. This will be intermediated by MMPs if you're choosing to use those. Certainly, so this is what your dashboards can look like: spend, install, conversion value, and this is how you calculate what your ROAS will look like. All right. Something else to note is that this can make sense. A big challenge with SKAdNetwork is it is still last click attribution. So if you are running multiple channels, you might want to use some kind of incrementality testing to make sure your the installs you're getting are truly incremental. That the revenue you're getting is truly incremental, because otherwise SKAdNetwork does not always guarantee that, if SKAdNetwork says, oh, source A, campaign A is extremely valuable, it may be stealing installs from other sources. So you want to be careful, especially if you're running multiple sources. If you're a smaller advertiser that's running primarily one or two sources, then I think you should still be good with just a SKAdNetwork. But otherwise, you want to get some kind of incrementality solution in place. Certainly look at some of our episodes on the mobile user acquisition show. We had one last week on how to use econometric models. We had one a couple of weeks ago on how to use incrementality tests. So certainly these are options that you can use just as well. And the big part is going to be, how do you run creative tests, right? So you're not going to be able to get precise creative level ROAS in the way that you're doing now. What you have to do is basically set up separate campaigns for different concepts and themes, and you get conversion value at the creative level whenever possible, that is, right? So which means you say, look, we're going to show older people for this particular subscription app, or we're going to show this new vignette based on winter for this match 3 game. Set up a campaign at the concept level. So the entire concept gets tested. Within a concept, obviously you have multiple variants, right? So let's say, just say you have a winter-based vignette for a match 3 game or a puzzle game. So this winter-based vignette, you have 5 variations of this winter-based vignette. So use the CTRs and IPMs of all of these concepts, these sub-concepts within a campaign to know and understand, because the CTRs and IPMs are still available for you to track within your Facebook dashboard. You don't have to rely on SKAdNetwork. It's available in your ad network dashboards just as well. So within a single concept, use CTRs and IPMs for evaluation, and between concepts, use the conversion value numbers, right? And this is also a way to identify different segments of audiences just as well. And while you're setting this up, while you're setting up your SKAdNetwork infrastructure, we also do recommend backtesting your LTVs based on IDFV. So you still have IDFVs in your internal databases. You still have aggregate user level LTVs based on the IDFV, So you can and should correlate those to conversion values to say, look, is my 20 conversion value of 20, does it correspond to a $5 LTV overall? And obviously, you're going to have to do some amount of approximations here because you don't know where these users are coming from. But doing this sort of back testing helps you do a sanity check on whether your conversion values are somewhat accurate or not at all, right? And that's about measuring, setting up your setting up your SKAdNetwork infrastructure to make sure you're measuring performance, to make sure you're tracking performance accurately. Another dimension of SKAdNetwork is the consent pop-up, which directly influences how much power your SKAdNetwork strategy does have. So I want to take a little bit of time to talk about the consent pop-up in SKAdNetwork and how you can make the most of it to maximize your consent in the user flow, right? So what's important to note is you can show the consent pop-up only once. So if a user denies it, you cannot show them again. So super important to keep in mind that sometimes you might just end up showing the consent prompt very, very early on, and that is it. You lost the opportunity to prompt them again. So something to keep in mind as you figure out where to show your consent prompt. It's important to test soft prompts, right? Certainly, if you use push notifications, you probably use some kind of soft prompts in the past, something like this. You say, subscribe to get breaking news, and then if a user is allowed, then you show the Apple prompt. That's what you did for push notifications. You can absolutely do something very similar for consent prompts for IDFA. Certainly, you can test this at first open, but also after a user has what we call a happy moment, right? A user completes a level, wins a reward. That's when you say, hey, would you like to get targeted advertising? Yes, no. And then you show the Apple prompt accordingly. That, of course, can help you maximize your consent, the percentage of users who will consent. Something else will be, you can absolutely customize the text in the consent prompt. So choose carefully. You cannot always A/B test this, but you can certainly do a pre-post test to know and understand what messaging would make the most sense here. So certainly you can and should do this sort of testing to maximize your conversion percentages, right? You can absolutely choose not to show consent prompts at all. And certainly very many advertisers I'm speaking to are considering this option just to make sure they have a smooth user experience. So, they're like, look, we don't want to, this can be very intrusive to our users. And anyway, we're going to measure and track all our users via SKAdNetwork. We don't want to worry about, and they're, in transparency, they're on 1 or 2 channels, so they don't need to worry too much about incrementality. So they're like, look, we're going to skip showing the prompt altogether, so that we maintain a strong user experience. So that is absolutely an option. You can and should consider that just as well. Right? And that is all we have for today's session. So to sum up, be very mindful and cognizant of how you architecture conversion values, because they are the only measure of what your user value will be eventually. That's the best proxy for eventual LTV. Play around with time durations, play around with revenue values, play around with retention to see what makes the most sense for you, and be cognizant of and mindful of your consent prompts to see what you can do to maximize the value of those. That's all we had for this session. Definitely open to questions, comments, feedback, anything else at all.
Great. Thanks, Shamanth. So let's get in. We've already got some questions. If anyone else has some questions, then please leave them in the question box and we will get on to those now. So let me do my best to read these out. So Andreas, who I think is the founder of Nibble Apps, he is asking, and he's had a few upvotes for this, does the user have to open the app to be able to update the conversion value? Or can your server update this conversion value?
Yeah, so the user does not have to open the app. Your server can absolutely do the update. I believe that was one of the examples I shared. The user flow could be user installs on day 1, day 0, opens the app on day 0, does not come back for 2 days, comes back after 2 days. The value can be incremented for days 1 and day 2. And after 2 days, the user makes a purchase, you increment it further after day 2. So yes, you do not need to have the user open the app. It can be updated from the server side. Yeah.
And another question, can the conversion value only be 0 or 1?
The conversion value can be 0 to 63, and we'll probably put out an episode about explaining exactly how the binary system works. But I would encourage you guys to check out, look at how the binary system works and how binary numbers are incremented. So 0 to 63 are, you get a total of 64 values. The 64 values range from 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, which corresponds to 0, to 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, right? And the numbers could be either 0 or 1. And if you do that math, that's a total of 64 values. And I can try and put out an episode about this later this week to explain this in much more detail for you guys as well.
Is that going to be, sorry, a podcast episode or?
Yeah, that's going to be on the podcast, right. Mobile User Acquisition Show. In the spirit of not going too much into the weeds just now.
Okay. And Martin from Remerge, he's a software engineer there. He says, have you already received postbacks with a conversion value or source app ID? We at Remerge so far haven't seen any conversion values or source app IDs yet, and we're wondering what the privacy thresholds for these may be.
Yeah, so I do know people have had problems with getting this to work. Yes, so there have been bugs, there have been issues with getting source app data and conversion values. So I will say you're not alone. I'm not as plugged into the technical side of things, but I do know this is a problem and it is still TBD in terms of resolution just now.
Great. And Thomas Beaton is asking, what's your personal take on this decision from Apple? Well, maybe from the point of view of someone running an agency, this is great for business. I don't know, probably makes you work hard, but yeah, what?
I mean, I think everyone's in a state of uncertainty. I don't know if agencies are in any better position than developers or publishers. I think we are all prepared for multiple scenarios. I think what's fairly clear is CPMs will drop and conversion rates will drop, both because you cannot hyper-target users. The net impact of lower CPM and lower conversion rate, that is the TBD. We have made multiple models. We have multiple models in the book, Definitive Guide to Marketing in a Post-IDFA World. But really, I don't think anybody truly knows what the exact shape of the market post-transition will be. We all have conjectures.
Let's see how it shakes out. Andreas says, will most of your clients be implementing consent pop-ups?
Most of them, yeah. Well, I would say many of them will. Some, as I pointed out in the presentation, are like, look, we don't want to jeopardize our user experience, so we'll probably, and by the way, we just use Facebook, so we don't want to we don't care as much about the consent pop-up, right? So that's an option that some developers are considering, but again, you have to do what makes sense for you. So, but I will say not implementing that pop-up is absolutely an option, which just means you're just not going to collect any device information.
Got it. And if you had to request one change from Apple's implementation, what would it be?
That's hard to say. I mean, considering there's just multiple, multiple things there, dimensions on which they've made these changes. But if I had to pick one, it would just be that having the conversion value go without a timestamp makes measurement much more tricky. So I would just say, if I had to request one change, it would be to have the conversion value be sent with the timestamp. And I think they can very well do that while still preserving a lot of the privacy features that they have.
Got it. And how do you think this is going to change? We had a great talk from Thomas Petit on Thursday, kicking off the event, talking about, well, what skills do smart app marketers need for the future? This like gets pretty sort of technical, trying to execute this, and it's very different from some of the other trends where things are being auto-optimized, and Thomas has the Chad marketer versus the Virgin marketer, and one's sort of pouring over everything, and the Chad is just letting it rip and doing the creatives. And yet this is really quite, as you say, you've really got to get in the weeds. So how's this going to change, app marketing and the skills app marketers need?
Yeah, I think there's going to be two skills that will start to become much more prominent in app marketing. One, as many of you may have heard and read, would just be data science and analysis. And I think that's more true of the larger developers. If you're a larger developer, if you have been running 10 sources on 15 countries, you do want to have some sort of data science power within your team to make sense of a lot of that data, which is very imprecise just now. That's, I think I would say, would be one skill. Number two, which I think hasn't been talked about nearly as much, is what I like to call creative strategy. I think the last couple of years, mobile marketing has had a lot of creative iteration, just because iteration's been so easy, right? And people have. I'm not even saying people have done it. Just we have done this. My team has done it, right? My team has been like, oh, this creative worked. Let's make 10 different variations of this creative. Let's get it out there. What have competitors done? Let's just take that same background. Let's take that same layout. Let's make a video based on it, right? So there's been a lot of incremental changes in creative testing. In all of that, I think a lot of marketers haven't taken that step back and said, oh, why is this creative working? Are there user motivations that we can look to that say, oh, this is why this creative is working? Can we build other creatives that appeal to these motivations, that appeal to these persuasive levers? And I think all of these that are very important in direct response marketing in other spheres, other verticals outside of mobile apps, I think will start to become much more prominent in mobile apps, for mobile apps. So in short, two skills I see becoming more prominent: data science and creative strategy.
Got it. Okay, so two very different sort of areas there. That's interesting. So And okay, for everyone out there thinking, okay, how do I implement this in my team, in my growth team? You know, what's the 80-20 of this? And if you're working with a client, what's the sort of process you would sort of go through right now? What would you be doing?
Yeah, I mean, the 80-20 is to just get to SKAdNetwork through your current MMP integration. That is the closest you can get to a plug and play setup. Eventually, you can look at other off-the-shelf solutions, but if you want to minimize transition risks, stay with your MMP. They all have some form of integration with SKAdNetwork. So that's the easiest step forward.
Great, so that's interesting. So some people were suggesting that the MMPs were going to be left with, you know, with not much to do in this new world, but it sounds from what you're saying that they're sort of more important than ever to sort of help provide the tooling to get people going on this.
Yeah, as well, to the earlier assertion that MMPs won't have anything to do, I would just say they just have different things to do, right? So whatever they're doing in the past, which is aggregating a lot of the data, that goes away. But in this case, especially if you're a small developer that's not able to plug into a SKAdNetwork, the MMP is going to provide the tooling that will let you do that.
Great. Okay. Well, yes, great session. Thank you, Shamanth. A lot of positive feedback there in the chat. So just want to say thanks a lot. How can people sort of keep up with you and, you know, find out more?
Yeah, so go to mobileuseracquisitionshow.com. Subscribe to our, feel free to subscribe via our email list. And of course, it's available wherever you get your podcast fix. We typically have an episode a week. So feel free to check us out there and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Yeah, just say you found me through this event.
Great. We've dropped a link to your post IDFA marketing guide as well. If you guys in there want to refresh, it should sort of show up. So, but yeah, I want to say thanks a lot, Shamanth, for coming and sharing with us, and hope to see you in person again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, James, for having me.